These Broncos routinely sell for over $250,000. What makes these so special? Welcome to Petrol Lounge. Presenting the 1969, or you might say the 2013 ICON Bronco. Now, you might look at this and think this is just a Ford Bronco, and you might wonder why I didn't say presenting the 1969 Ford Bronco, and what makes it an icon. And, well, I mean, this is truly a really special Bronco. And a really expensive one as well. Now, these days you may see a nice resto-modded Ford Bronco cross the auction block for maybe $125,000, maybe even $150,000. These have really been going up in value. But these, even back in 2013, this was still a $200,000 rig when you bought it from ICON. And I'll be honest, when I first heard about ICON and what they did, I thought, you know, these guys must be making a ton of money out of this, because at that time you could buy a nice straight Bronco like this, well, not like this, but a nice, you know, original Bronco for maybe $50,000. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of headroom here to just do a whole bunch of stuff and make it really nice and be really cool. So surely there's like $100,000 worth of profit in these things. And a few years later, actually this one, I was going to say one of these, but it was this one. This one has traded owners a few times. It's been in and out of the building. Strangely, it's left, been sold again, gone through a couple owners, and then come back to us again through another unassociated owner. Just kind of weird tidbit there. Anyway, it shows up, and I start going through it, and I start looking at it, and I start realizing, like, oh my God, I don't know that it's worth $200,000 or $250,000, but I promise you I can show you, and I'm going to, where that money is spent. This is truly special. It's amazing. So I guess, you know, really the big question to start off with is, you know, what is ICON? You know, this thing says ICON Bronco on it. On the front of the grill, it says ICON instead of Ford. Everywhere where normally would say Ford, you see ICON. So what are they? What do they do? Well, they're a company out of California, founded by a guy named Jonathan Ward, and he got kind of tired of doing the resto-mod thing and doing the concours restoration thing, and he had this idea of what he wanted to create. And I'm going to paraphrase here because it's a little bit of kind of my experience with this vehicle and some of the other ones that he's done, and just with vintage cars in general. And really the thing that you find is if you do a concours restoration, a true perfect restoration on a car like this, you have a memory of these vehicles, and they seem like they're wonderful and great. And then you go and drive a true concours car and you go, well, it's okay. And don't get me wrong. If you get in the right mindset, if you go, hey, it is 1969 all over again, and you drive it with that mindset and you realize what was around at the time and the way cars were, yes, it's still an amazing car, and it's a great like time machine back to that period when they were building cars that way. But what you really remember, what you think the cars were, is you remember, hey, I had a 69 Bronco. Man, that thing could go over everything, and it had all this power, and man, you know, it was so comfortable, and me and my buddy used to take it, and we'd go out to the beach, and we'd do this and that and the other thing. And the truth is, the cars aren't as great as your memory. If you walk up on this car, if it was in a parking lot or you're just walking around in here, as long as you're 5-10 feet away, you could really mistake this for a, you know, just a really good vintage vehicle. It looks authentic. It feels authentic. And it's not until you're right up on it that you start going, wait, this isn't what I think it is. Things are a little nicer than they should be. And in that regard, this vehicle matches your memory of the car. That better memory that you have, this matches that. But it still feels like, looks like, mostly drives like that old Bronco. You feel like it's authentic and it's true to that nature. And that's really what he's trying to achieve here. He's trying to get the soul of the vehicle but at the same time build it better than Ford ever could have built it or ever would have built it, even if they could at the time. I'm just going to start right here on the outside of the vehicle, and this is something that isn't really evident, but it is a really big deal on this truck. One of the first things you'll notice are these big, massive tires on this vehicle, and these are 35s, and this is what everybody wants to go out rock crawling, and this truck is, if you wanted to do that with this, it's extremely capable. So these big tires allow you to roll over big rocks. They're really fantastic. Unfortunately, to fit this kind of modern rubber on a vintage truck like this, what restomodders typically do is they start pulling these fenders out. They make them really wide, and then they go in the back, and this back fender back here, which I'm going to walk to, they'll actually cut this fender out, and they'll fabricate a whole new fender back here, or maybe they'll just bolt something on. All the body panels on this truck are original. They're unmolested, they haven't been cut on, they haven't been changed. They are identical to the way they were on the truck. It's one of the few pieces of this truck that is actually original to the car. But that created a problem. You want to put these big, massive tires on here, and you don't want to change the body. You want to keep that the way it was. Well, to get that, the whole entire chassis underneath this car, the suspension, everything has been custom designed by ICON. It is a complete redesign of what Ford did, and it is a proper, real redesign. The rear axle back here, and I believe these axles are Dana 44s. I can't remember. They're not documented anywhere that I can find. I had somebody come in and look at them, and I remember them saying they were Dana axles. 44 is the number I remember, but I am not a off-roader, so I could get this wrong. You're happy to correct me and tell me, oh no, those are whatever. But this one has been shortened. It's narrower than normal, and you can see that in the track of the vehicle. The rear track is actually a little narrower than the front, and that was to keep these tires up underneath these rear fenders and not modify it in any way. And even when we look at these wheels are wheels designed by ICON. And again, initially when you look at them, they look properly vintage. They look like something that you would find on a 1966 truck, or sorry, 1969 truck in 1969. But really, these are big wheels, and they didn't make wheels this big back then. You could not have bought these, you could not have fit them on this truck, but your eye doesn't catch it and go, oh, that stands out, that looks different. No, I mean, it'd be an easy trick to go with a really big polished wheel, some kind of off-road thing, something modern with bead lockers around it, all those kind of things, but that wouldn't fit the character of this car. It wouldn't be true to the spirit of the original Bronco. So he didn't do it. He just made this wheel that looked mostly authentic. And I think it's those kind of details that make this truck great, that really show that dedication to spending the time, taking the effort, doing the extra thing. And it's everywhere in this truck. You're really going to see. It's absolutely crazy. Everywhere you look outside of here, everything is billet aluminum or billet stainless steel. These handles, these door handles, from 10 feet away, they look like the original door handles. But when you get up on them here, this is milled out of a single chunk of stainless steel. I mean, they used a CNC machine on these, you can tell, and they're just substantial. You put your hand on it. I've felt the original factory door handles. They look like this, but they're thin. They're aluminum, and I mean, it feels like if you were just gonna wrench on it hard, you could just pull it right off the car, and this is absolutely solid. I feel like I could pull the door off with this handle, and it's not just that the door handle is solid, however they mounted it behind the door is also solid. And you come to the mirror, and again, this is a custom piece. It is milled out of stainless steel, and you look at it, and it would be so easy to have just gone with something wild or garish, or you want to do a more modern design because it's a modern rig. But no, it very much looks like the original mirrors that were on the truck. And anybody else would have just said, hey, we can just use the original mirrors. Why not just use the original mirrors? We're looking for the original style. They work fine, they look fine, everything's great. No, You want something that when you touch it, it feels substantial. When you move it, it's, well, I mean, it's tough to move. You really have to put some force behind it. And it just feels like a solid, functional piece in this vehicle. And Ford never made anything this nice, never made anything this solid. And again, you know, it's all through this vehicle. Just wait. This grille is just, it's really substantial. Everybody, when they walk up on it, they're kind of amazed because you would think it's just the standard kind of pot metal or aluminum thing that Ford put on all the trucks. It's, you know, really thin metal, just enough to give it a shape and a form. And when you come up on this, it is really like a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum, and it's just massive and solid. I could literally push this truck around just pushing on the grille and never have to worry about, am I going to bend this? Am I going to damage it? No, it is a substantial piece. And the same thing goes for these letters that they put on here. They're not hollow. They are solid letters. And, you know, everything about this is like that. Even this bumper that they put on here, it's really thick metal as well. It houses a winch inside of it. Now, they did go with some modern lights here, and especially here, and you can notice that. But it's one of those things where, again, you really don't want the original lights in this thing. I don't know how many of you drive around in a vintage automobile with original lights. I am always amazed that we drove around with those lights and didn't get killed. Modern cars today, I can roll around all night, especially in the city, and never touch the brights, never even need them, never even think about it. I can't remember the last time I used them in my everyday car. But you get in even something from the 90s and you start driving it at night and you're like, oh, hey, I need to use those brights, and I need to use them every single time that there's not oncoming traffic. Even in the city where there's street lights, it's really appalling just how terrible they are. And this is a much more modern and substantial light, which you do need, you know, off-road and where this car is expected to be used. The paint on this I haven't addressed, but this is a 1969 Porsche color. And gosh, I have to be careful about how to pronounce it. It is fjord green, like the fjords in Norway. It's really easy for me to say it's Ford green, which it is not Ford green. It has no relation to a Ford truck, but it is kind of a vintage color that you would expect from the time period. And Jonathan just felt like it was much more of a outdoorsy kind of Ford color than Ford actually produced. We didn't stick with the factory 6-cylinder engine in this car. This is a 5.0 Coyote engine from a 2013 Mustang GT. I say that, technically this is a crate engine. It was bought from Ford. It didn't actually come out of anything. It was new to this truck. Now, I have seen this resto mod done before. I have seen people put this engine in this vehicle. Interesting thing is this engine doesn't actually fit in a lot of ways, and it requires a lot of reworking under here. And most of these engines, when people do this mod, because of the factory chassis and things that can't be moved and can't be changed, the engine's actually tilted up just a little bit. And you can do that. It's not ideal for the engine, of course, but you can get away with it. It's not going to hurt anything. It just doesn't look perfect. This one is flat in the car, mounted the way that it should be, and he was able to do that because the whole chassis is completely redesigned, and he redesigned it with the intent that this is the engine that was going to go into it. And also, you know, you'd look at this and you might say, well, you know, why don't you put a, you know, LS engine in it or something like that? And Jonathan likes to keep the cars, the word that comes to mind is original, but he likes to keep them kind of in the family. So if you're, you know, dealing with the Ford, he likes to use Ford engines and Ford parts and tie it into the Ford family some way. And there's actually a little bit of extra detail in this that I'm going to get to in a minute when we talk about the plaque over there. But just looking at this, and you look in here, and everything is just so well thought out and well planned. You look at the, you know, the brake master cylinder. I've seen so many times, because of the way that it's originally mounted in the car, to get it to fit with this 5.0 engine in here, you have to actually like cut on the engine cover and you have to move some stuff around. And that's not done here. It's actually custom mounted in here at an angle so that you have all the clearances you need for this engine. And even the computer, the modern stuff, is tucked away over here where you can almost ignore it. I mean, it's there, but you got to look for it. You got to tell that, hey, oh, look, there it is. And he keeps little neat touches like the little plastic bag that Ford originally used for the windshield wiper fluid. It's as vintage as you can make it, but at the same time, it is thoroughly modern. And, you know, again, we didn't have, you know, struts on this hood when it was new. It was, you know, you had a prop rod and everything else. This is just, it's just the way you would want it if you were thinking about your ideal Bronco. But it never really feels inauthentic either. You know, in this time period, you did have a lot of cars with big, huge springs that would help hold the hood up. And you don't have that here, but the memory is, oh yeah, you could raise the hood and you could, you know, it would just stay up because a lot of the cars of the era did. It doesn't feel wrong. It just feels right. Everything about this really feels right. And just, you know, I feel like I could talk forever about the engine bay, and it's just because every time you look at it, you're like, oh, this is unique and this is different. And, you know, all the paintwork that was done, it's obvious that somebody cared, that this was really what they wanted to create here. And you can also tell everything got touched. And if it was touched, it was recreated in the best possible way, and the job was done with no shortcuts, no, you know, you're not trying to save time, you're not trying to save money, you're trying to do it the best that you possibly can. And it's remarkable. The more you're around this truck, the more that you touch it, the more that you play with it, you just see more and more of it. Just a few minutes ago, and you know, I'll show you this too in a minute, we were looking at it and we saw the windshield wipers, and I'd never even really looked at them that closely before, but they look pretty factory, they look pretty vintage. And you get up on them and you're like, oh no, yeah, he actually touched those too. They're completely machined, they're completely custom, they look original, you can overlook them, but yeah, they are their own custom piece. It's like literally everything was recreated to be perfect other than the exterior shell. And even the body panels, they're straight, they're perfect, they're perfectly painted. I promise you, Ford never could have done a paint job this good in their factory in 1969. It's just incredible. And I spoke about the plate up here. There's a special plate on this truck. It tells you a little bit about it. It tells you, you know, this is an ICON Bronco. This is number 10. This is the 10th one that was ever built. It was built in 2013. It tells you who designed it. And the gauge clusters here were designed by Camilo Paru. And he is the guy who actually designed the Ford GT, the new modern one that was done in 2005, 2006. Same designer that designed that car actually did the gauges in here. Again, trying to keep that Ford family thing going, keep it together with this truck. It's, you know, every single one of these is such a labor of love, and it's just amazing for me, you know, when I'm in it and around it. As we walk around the side here, I'm going to point out some stuff that I just totally missed the last time. Speaking of the Ford family, and speaking of just trying to keep this in mind as the Bronco that Ford should have built, or the Bronco that your mind remembers. There's a few details on here. If you know your Broncos, you're going to say, oh, that's not quite correct. Like this trim here, this trim piece that's metal that is custom made for this. Broncos didn't come with this. This is a piece off of the Ford Ranger that Jonathan felt like should have been on the Bronco and really fits with the character of the time and the cars that Ford was making of the time. So in his mind, these are the turn signals and the things that Ford should have made for this truck. And again, you even look at these turn signals and they've all got this special protective surround on them. And this again is that machined metal that, you know, you're not going to budge it, you're not going to damage it. You can, it is a substantial part. You know, if you were to hit this off-roading, you're going to bend the fender before you ever damage anything here or anything that's protected by it. You'll probably never have to replace that turn signal. As we move back here to the rear of the truck, it really is more of the same. It's the same stuff I've been talking about the whole time. You know, you've got these big, massive, substantial metal protective pieces. You've got this really massive, nice bumper. It's also got a neat little touch here. It's got some little lockable compartments here. So the interior of this is hollow, and you can access it through these compartments, which, you know, help if something were to happen to this bumper and you have to, you know, have it repaired. You can get inside without having to unweld everything. But also it's a nice little lockable, secure, and there's even a little bit of weather stripping under here to keep it watertight. So you could put stuff in here to keep it safe from the elements and just, you know, outfit your off-road rig. Gosh, you know, again, where do I even start? You know, you have this massive spare tire back here. You have this substantial, you know, piece here that holds it on. It's way over engineered. This is way more than this needs, but it just feels great when you actually undo it and you swing it out. It's down here. Again, this, you know, all these pieces just feel substantial. They feel wonderful. They've got, you know, it's just a great feel. And then you swing this out and you're like, oh my God, it's heavy. You know, you feel like I couldn't damage this if I tried, but it's so smooth. It's just butter smooth. It's easy to swing. It doesn't bind or grab, or, you know, there's nothing that limits any of its movement, except when you get it here, it does stop. And this is just another thoughtful touch here that once you've swung this out, you don't want wind blowing this back into your open tailgate or whatever. So there's actually a little catch back here that you have to, I probably can't get to it from this side, but you have to lift this up so you can swing this closed. And, you know, back here, this is very vintage, but yet, again, you have these struts here that open it up really smoothly. It feels very modern, even though it's not. And then this tailgate is just, it is a super heavy piece. It feels great. The originals are kind of thin. Again, you know, Ford was trying to save money on this truck. And, you know, you could actually, you know, the metal on this, you could easily bend it, dent it. You could sit on these tailgates, but it feels kind of flimsy. This one is just rock solid. It feels like, I mean, just one solid piece of aluminum, even though it's not. And then, you know, the rings that you have back here to tie stuff down with, I want to tell you everything. I want to show you everything and show you just how well built this is. And, you know, the materials that are used, I wish you could be here with me and touch this thing and just feel the weight of this, or feel the way things move in this truck. And I mean, it feels more like a 1969 Mercedes-Benz, or maybe even a modern Mercedes-Benz. Since we've gone around the entire outside of the vehicle, how about we go ahead and open it up and go inside so I can show you just how special it is, both inside as well as out. And really, it starts as soon as you open the door. I don't know if it's going to pick up on the camera or not, but the click, the firmness when you push on the, whatever you want to call this, the push button to open the door, it is a substantial feeling. It's kind of like a pop, but it feels really amazing. And this door, it's way heavier than it should be. And even when you shut it, they didn't shut like that in 1969. Not even Mercedes-Benzes shut like that in 1969. And it just makes you feel like this is a true quality product. And you have this nice little step that folds down. Again, not something you would have had in 1969, but nice to have today. And since it tucks up underneath the truck, you never really see it until you open the door. So it still feels like it is. And looking at the inside of this door, this is the type of stuff that Jonathan Ward does over at ICON. This material, it's way better than anything Ford would have had at the time or that they would have used, but it looks 1969. It feels 1969, but it's just so much better. And then, you know, this little aluminum trim here, they didn't do that on the original car. It is original, and yet it's not. And your mind makes it original because it doesn't call attention to the fact that, hey, this is not what would have been here. Except if you really pay attention to it, when you really look at it and you go, oh, wait a second, this is different, this is special. And coming inside, it looks like 1969 in here. It feels like 1969, but there are some changes. The pedals are unique. They're an ICON special thing that they built. They've got the little ICON lizard on them. The wheel is an ICON wheel, but it's made of materials and feels like something that you would find in a car of this vintage. And they didn't hack up the dash to put in a fancy new radio. The original didn't have a radio. And they didn't just hang it out underneath, just like, oh, hey, we'll just put it down under here and it'll work. Even these knobs and everything that are in here, even the ones that aren't original, they feel like they should be original. They feel real. Or, we do have power windows in here. Of course, we didn't have power windows in 1969, but they don't look out of place. They don't feel out of place. Actually, I should correct myself. We did have power windows in 1969. We just wouldn't have them in a Ford Bronco. You would have had that in the Lincoln Continental or a few other things. The gauge, I do love the gauge. It is a very nice gauge. Has a lot of detail in it. It gives you a lot of information. It is one of the few things in this car that doesn't really look vintage. I won't even say it doesn't really look vintage. It doesn't look vintage, but I understand. It has a great look to it. It has a great feel. And honestly, you need all of this information. You want all of this information, and you only have one place to put it because originally this is where the speedometer was going to be. And, well, you just have to integrate that. And it's a much better and more elegant solution than putting 10 gauges over here, even though there's the space, and making it something it wasn't. And a lot of people would go with a digital multifunction gauge over here. And while this does have some digital aspects to it, it's still very analog. So in some ways, it could be vintage. It's just way more complex than anything would be in a car of this era. Just looking at these knobs, everybody always asks, what are these? Because they don't really have great labels on them. And if you know your vintage vehicles, you'll know that back then, most of your controls weren't labeled at all. The manufacturers felt like you were going to have one, maybe two vehicles, and you would know them really well. And so there wasn't really a need to label all the switchgear and everything else. You would read the owner's manual, you'd know what it did, and you would just drive it. And we've preserved that here, and you have a few letters here that remind you what they are. This L is for your lights, and it works pretty much like a modern light does. You pull it back, it turns them on. You also have a dimmer, and you can turn on the little extra light here on the dash, which I think is a neat touch because it would have been cheap and easy to just go, you know what, we'll make all these lighted, we'll light all this stuff up. It wouldn't be true to the character. I mean, there would have, if you had a light on the dash, it would just be a small light like that. It wouldn't have been a lighted dash because, again, this is a truck and it is a cheap truck and you're not going to get a whole lot of extras. W, this one is for the wipers. You turn it on and turn it off. And yes, there were power wipers at that time. And a lot of times it was just like we see here with just this motor attached to the top of the windscreen. And really simple, really direct, really easy. F, okay, see, I have to think sometimes here. The F is actually the fan speed, so that is for the air conditioning here in the car. You twist it to the right, it gets faster. You turn it to the left, you turn it off. Vent, this is whether you want the vents open or closed. You can have the air, or take that back. It may be where it directs the air to. Again, it's not like I own this vehicle. I don't drive it a whole lot. So this is one that I know it controls the vents. I'm not entirely sure exactly what it does. The T over here, this is for temperature. So the more you crank it over to the right, the hotter it gets and the colder it gets. And you'll see one concession on this dash for modern amenities. You will find a little 12-volt socket here that I don't believe is on the original truck, but it is nice to have. That way you can power your radar detector or whatever accessories you need here in the cockpit. This piece here in the center, this is a custom piece. It is a glove box that is lockable, and also it is where the radio is housed in here. So there is a radio in this vehicle. Everything's kind of hidden away. You can't see it, but there is a modern radio tucked in here with a nice cover so that you don't see it. Unfortunately, I do not have the key to this glove box, so I'm not able to open this up and show you the radio, but trust me, there is a radio in here. The seats that I'm sitting in, these are, I believe these are out of another, they should be out of another Ford product. I'm not sure exactly which one they are. They are definitely not the seats that came in this truck. They are much nicer, but again, they're not modern. They don't take your eye away from it and make you think, oh my God, this doesn't work, this doesn't fit. The transmission that we're using here is, however, modern. It is the traditional 5-speed transmission that you'd find in your Mustang GT. Really nice, shifts really well. I do like that they kept the transfer case from the original Bronco, and this one is really unique. People come in here and they look at it and they wonder what it is. It's got 2 sticks and they're like, how does that work? And what it is this one controls the rear and this controls the front. And right now the front is disengaged, it's in neutral, so we are rear wheel drive only. And because it's forward, it's in high gear. So if we pull this all the way back, that puts us in low gear. And you can select whether you want to run the front or rear axles or both. So you could actually run this vehicle in front wheel drive if you wanted. I guess there's really only one more thing to do, and that's actually start this thing up, because it really doesn't sound, well, it doesn't sound like what you'd expect, and it really is glorious. So let's go ahead and do that. At the end of all this, we come back to that question of, these trucks routinely sell for a lot of money. I've seen them sell for over $250,000, and is it worth it? And I gotta tell you, it really is. I mean, again, every time I'm in this vehicle, every time I look at it, I see something I didn't see before. I learned something about it that I didn't know before. And yeah, I really do. I really think this truck is worth all the money. I see, you know, all these other Broncos that are going for, you know, 150. I've seen some go for 180, and they're not even half as nice as this. There's not the time, there's not the effort put in. You know, I might like the color better, or I might like a little something better, but really, when it comes to a complete package, this is a truck you can get out and you can drive. I've seen resto mods that weren't even drivable because they were just so caught up in, let's make it look cool, let's make it look great, and they sell for a ton of money. This is everything, and I just can't stress the attention to detail, the amount of work that went into this. I don't know how many hours Jonathan and his team put into this car, how much work went into it, but it was a lot. Once again, thank you for joining us. This has been the 1965, 2013 ICON Bronco. We've got a lot more content coming your way. I'm sure you're looking in the background. I'm sure you're looking at all these cars. Hit like and subscribe. We've got more stuff coming your way. We're gonna have more stuff coming. There's stuff I'm looking at right now that I know that I'm about to do, you know, the next time that we're together. So you're really gonna wanna be there for that. Until next time.